For this MyGM playthrough, I decided to give myself an incredibly annoying challenge: to book a GM interference every single week. If you didn't know, GM interferences decrease the morale of the wrestler that they're used against, resulting in them whinging and moaning until they ultimately ask for $100,000 not to leave. So not only will I have a bunch of unhappy wrestlers, I'll also have at least one bad match per show. Seeing as you can only book a GM interference in a normal match, those matches are never rated highly, so it's really a double-edged sword. This challenge is going to be about trying to find ways to avoid the $1,000 penalty whilst also keeping the show quality and match ratings up. So let's get into it and see how I do. Okay, so for the first choice we're going to make, I'm going to pick Shane, even though he's clearly the worst GM. And that's just because his power card, the Coast to Coast power card, gives you one free GM interference for a week and gives a +2 show bonus. For this specific challenge, I think it would be a lot better using Sonya Deville, but I do actually think that would make it a little bit too easy. Now, the only reason I say that is because if you have +15 morale on every single other one of your superstars, then it's likely that you're only ever going to have to give a 100k bonus to one of them. And just to let you know, that's how I'm going to be planning to do this. I'm only going to be targeting one or maybe two superstars at a time so I can give them some rest, and basically booking a GM interference against that person every single week. Because in my mind, if they then go and ask for a $100,000 check to stay with the company, then at least it's only one or two people rather than 4 or 5 potentially. So we're going to go with Shane because he never gets any love for obvious reasons, and I feel like I want to give him a chance. So if I wanted to torture myself, I would use NXT UK and make the challenge even harder, but I think using Shane and having to book a GM interference every single week is already a challenge in itself, so I'm going to go with NXT. And for the session settings, I'm going to go with my arch nemesis Sonya, who has an ability to keep all of her superstars happy, unlike me. The opposing brand's going to be SmackDown, and then obviously the difficulty is going to be hard. 15 weeks as always, so let's get into the run, and hopefully this one is a success. So the draft. Now, obviously there's one thing that not many people look at, which I'm actually going to be looking at here, which is the morale of each superstar. Now, the reason I'm going to do that is because the superstar that I'm planning on interfering against every single week, I want to have high morale. Because if they do, then it will take longer for them to go down to the kind of level where they ask for bonuses, and it will make my life a lot easier. So instead of signing a main event star who's going to carry this run from start to finish, I'm going to go right down to the bottom and sign a pretty rubbish wrestler with very high morale. So I've been through pretty much the entire list of the 160,000 or below costing superstars, and Austin Theory has the highest morale with 67. So unfortunately for this run, Austin is going to be losing every single fight due to Shane sprinting in and helping the opponent. Now, the reason I wanted to use a cheaper superstar instead of a main eventer to do this with is because I'll need the main eventers to carry me throughout the rest of the run. If I annoy a John Cena or a Drew McIntyre for the entire run, then eventually they're going to ask for either $100,000 or their release, which means that either the rivalry is gone or I'm extremely broke. And when it's your main event stars, it's more than likely they're going to be fighting for the title, so obviously you want that rivalry to continue. So now I think I'm going to do the same thing but for the women's division, and then from then on it's just a normal draft. So I've just used the same method that I did to find Austin Theory on the women's division, and Peyton Royce is actually the highest morale superstar with 61. So from here on out, it's just a normal draft, so I'm just going to go ahead and choose the remaining superstars, and then I'll catch up with you again when we get into the actual run. So they're the final results from the draft. I've gone for my main event stars being Finn Balor and Kevin Owens, then Tamina and Alexa Bliss, and then I've managed to actually build 2 tag teams around it with the other 2 rivalries as well. So 8 male superstars and 8 female superstars. It's looking pretty good. Let's get into it and see how it all goes. So the champions, as always, are just going to be the most popular male fighter and the most popular female fighter. And usually I have 4 titles on the line in week 1, but this time I have to have either Austin Theory or Peyton Royce perform so I can have a GM interference. So that's how I've set up week 1 with Finn Balor and Kevin Owens fighting for the title in the main event, and then I've got the women's tag team match in the opener with the male tag team fights as the second mid-card match, and then of course I've got Austin Theory versus Dexter Lumis where I run in and help Dexter. So one thing I will be doing is regularly checking on Austin and Peyton's morale just to see how much a GM interference actually makes a difference to it, but also to figure out at what level a morale needs to be at for them to ask for the 100,000 bonus, as I think that might be quite useful for future runs. And seeing as Shane's card is so useless, I'm going to use it in week 1 and see what it actually does. So as you can see there, we've saved a massive $3,000. I can't believe how rich we're going to be after this, so let's get into the show and see if the bonus actually makes a difference. So it's a bad start with the first match getting a 2-star rating. We're going to be relying on these matches to carry us through the entire playthrough, so we really wanted that to be 2.5-star minimum. So of course, Loomis goes over in the GM interference match, and it actually also gets a 2-star rating, so that doesn't say a lot about the women's tag match. Ivar and Lorcan win the titles, and it's another 2-star match, so this is a pretty dreadful first show. But Finn and Kevin put on a decent main event as Finn wins the title in a 3-star match. So we can put this one behind us now. Next week's just going to have to be a hell of a lot better. As expected, with 13,000 fans behind after show 1, so we've got a lot of work to do to close that gap. And obviously after the match with Dexter Loomis, Austin Theory has had a small decrease to his morale and has already come into our DMs raging. So for week 2, we've got the women's title on the line in the main event in a tables match, and then the male tag team titles as the opening fight. This week it's Peyton Royce's turn to be on the receiving end of a GM interference from Shane, so we'll see how that one goes. And then the second tag team match is just a regular match with the 2 teams feuding for the title. Okay, so I've just come through to check Austin Theory's morale, and it's actually gone down by 22. I'm going to be trying to book him into the GM interference every other week, so hopefully it doesn't go too low, but this is a pretty bad start. Also, I'm going to look to max out my logistics every single time I can, as I've got a good amount of money, and this is going to be really important when retaining fans and putting on good shows, seeing as every single week we're essentially 1 match down. Anyway, let's advance and keep our fingers crossed that this show is just a little bit better than last week's. So we kick things off with an infinitely better opening match as Oni and Ivar win the titles in a 3-star rated tables match. Okay, so I've just simulated the Peyton Royce versus Dana Brooke match, and Peyton Royce has actually won this time, even though Austin Theory lost last time, so I'm not really sure how that works. Either way, it's a 1.5-star match, and that's really going to affect our fans going into week 3. So the second mid-card fight gets a 2-star rating, and the rivalry does level up to level 2, but unfortunately that's not really good enough at all. Let's hope for a good main event to round out the show, but to be honest, I'm already worried about this run. Okay, we're somewhat saved as Alexa beats Tamina in a 3.5-star match for the title. Not all hope is lost, but we're going to have to really step it up in the next few weeks. After that show, we're now 19,000 fans down, which is a pretty shocking start. I guess we're just going to have to keep going and hope that that amount decreases. So Peyton Royce's morale was actually 61 at the start of the run, and now it's only 56, so if they win the match, they must not lose as much morale. But again, I don't really know how that works, so I guess I'll just keep booking them into the matches and see how it all goes. So week 3 sees Finn defend his title again against Kevin Owens in the main event, and then the opener is the women's tag match, and it's going to be a tables match. Of course, in the number 1 mid-card slot, we've got Austin Theory versus Dexter Loomis, and I'll be running in to help Dexter. And then in the second mid-card, we've got Alexa Bliss versus Tamina, hopefully progressing their rivalry in another tables match. I've also thrown in a couple of charity promos just to try and get a couple of fans, so this show should be interesting. Let's get into it. So Nia and Liv win the titles in a 3.5-star opening fight, and that rivalry is actually level 3, so it's perfect going into Wrestlemania Backlash. And in the first mid-card match, Dexter wins again, so Austin really isn't going to be happy, and I'm getting worried that he's going to start making some pretty crazy demands. The second mid-card match is a 3.5-star, with Alexa beating Tamina in a tables match. Then the main event also gets a 3.5-star as Finn Balor retains his title against Kevin once again, and the rivalry goes up to level 2. So aside from Dexter and Theory's 2-star match, the whole card was 3.5 stars. So I'm somewhat hopeful going into the results that we've pulled some fans back on Sonya. And as you can see, we've actually managed to narrow the gap down to 9,000 fans. That show gained us 10,000 fans on them, so let's keep building on that and hopefully we can catch up to her in no time. So already, Theory really is crying in the DMs as he's just said, if you want me out, just come and say it to my face next time. And to be honest, mate, I keep running out into the matches, so it's pretty in your face. I wish there was a feature where if the tensions got so high, I could just book a match between Shane and Theory. That would genuinely be amazing, so 2K, if you're listening, put it in the game. So week 4 has the women's title in the main event as Alexa faces Tamina in an Extreme Rules match. The opener is a male tag team with the title on the line, but that one's just going to be a normal match. Then the first mid-card, of course, is the GM interference for Dana Brooke on Peyton Royce. Then the second mid-card match has the female tag teams going against each other in a tables match. I've just come over to check Theory's morale and it's down at a terrible 26. Strategically thinking, if I get past WrestleMania Backlash and Theory hasn't asked for a 100,000 bonus, I might actually just release him to get some money for him rather than either having to pay the money or just let him go for free. So seeing as Peyton's morale is so much better than Theory's, I'm actually going to book her into week 4 with the GM interference and then also WrestleMania Backlash. Because if I can preserve Theory's morale until then I can just release him and actually make money on him rather than have to spend 100,000 or lose him for free. Anyway, let's get into the show and build on last week. So it's a pretty disappointing start as Wilde and Wolf go over in a 2.5 star rated tag team titles match. So in the first mid-card match, Dana actually wins this time with the GM interference, so Peyton's morale is actually going to go quite a bit lower, and it only got a 2-star rating, which really isn't great. In hindsight, I should have put the second mid-card match as the opener, but either way, the female tag match gets a 3.5 star. And the main event sees a bit of an upset as Tamina wins the title off Alexa in a 4-star rated match. That rivalry is at level 3, so let's go into WrestleMania Backlash and hopefully overtake Sonya. So actually we didn't even need WrestleMania Backlash as we're already ahead of Sonya after week 4. Sure, it's only by 400 fans, but I'll absolutely take it. So unfortunately, Austin Theory's already come into the DMs and asked for $100,000. I honestly thought I could get away with having him for another week, but clearly not. So of course I'm going to say there's no chance I'm giving you 100k and see what he says. And as expected, he's left the company, so we're going to have to go and find Dexter Lumis another opponent. But what I'm thinking here is because Dexter Lumis has had 2 GM interferences for him already, his morale probably is quite high, so the person I sign could be the guy that I actually interfere for. Anyway, we'll figure that out when we get to it. First, we've got to book WrestleMania Backlash and keep our lead going on Sonya. So I actually got a Veto Champ Power card after last week's show, so I'm going to go ahead and use that for this pay-per-view. Unfortunately, Tamina has been vetoed from my show, so I can't have the female title on the line, so I'm saving Fighting Champion for Week 10 TLC PPV. I was planning on doing this anyway, but obviously I want to make sure that I've got all 4 titles on the line when I use this power card. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and use the Veto Champ Power card and hopefully make Sonya's life miserable. So there's the cards set up for WrestleMania Backlash. Of course, having Tamina vetoed means we had to buy Happy Corbin in to fight Dexter Lumis. Now, seeing as I've already got a GM interference as the first mid-card match, I don't need this one to be, so I've just put them in a tables match to try and get as high a rating as possible. But that Veto Champ card from Sonya actually caused so much more damage than I thought it would, as Corbin cost me $170,000. So now our budget is spread pretty thin and the match card is not really looking that great. But either way, we've got the women's tag team match for the title in an Extreme Rules match as the opener, and then Finn versus Kevin in an Extreme Rules match for the title in the main event, with the aforementioned GM interference match as the first mid-card fight, and then Happy Corbin versus Dexter Lumis, and then the male tag team fight as the third mid-card match. So let's advance into it. I think that this might be a bit of a dud, and that Sonya will probably take a pretty hefty lead after this show. The women's tag team match is doing its best to make sure that that isn't the case though, as they get a 4.5 star rating in the opening fight. As expected, it's another 2-star match between Dana and Peyton, and Dana goes over again, so Peyton's going to really start to get annoyed now. The second mid-card fight actually isn't too bad, with Happy Corbin winning and getting a 2.5 star rating as well. We needed a big comeback in the third mid-card match, and that's exactly what we've got, with Ivar and Lorcan going over in a 4-star amazing rated match. Then to finish off the show, Balor and Owens complete their rivalry in a 4.5 star classic, and Finn retains the title yet again. All in all, I don't think the show was too bad, but let's go and see how much those first 2 mid-card matches affected us. So even after a pay-per-view with a couple of awful matches on, we've managed to gain 11,000 fans on Sonya. So that's pretty good heading into week 6, but we've got a few issues to sort out now in terms of how we're going to book our GM interferences. So the first big decision of week 6 is to release Peyton Royce, as her morale is now down at 26. Now, if you remember, that is the exact level that Austin Theory's got to right before he decided to ask for 100k. So I'm going to release Peyton and then go and sign one of the jobbers to feud with Dana. So coming into this show, I realise I have a few more issues than I even accounted for. Firstly, after this rivalry is done, which is only going to be in 2 weeks, Alexa or Tamina need a new opponent. But as it stands, Tamina holds the title, which means Liv Morgan would have to be her opponent. But she currently holds 1/2 of the tag team titles, so I'm going to try and get that off her so she can feud with Tamina in the future. The other issue I have is that Kevin Owens now can't feud with Finn, which means that I have to start a new feud with Oni. And of course, Oni is one half of the male tag champions. Anyway, this is the show going into week 6. We've got the women's tag team title on the line in the opener, and then the women's title on the line in the main event. Then the midcards have the GM interference on Dexter Lumis, because actually he has 98 morale, which I just checked. And I've started a new rivalry in the men's division with Kevin Owens and Ivar going off against Alexander Wolf and Joaquin Wilde. Pretty bad show, but let's advance and hope that it doesn't do too much damage. So Liv and Nia retain in a 2.5 star match and no rivalries formed. Pretty awful start to the show, but at least it wasn't 2-star. Happy Corbin of course goes over against Dexter Lumis, and it's actually a 2.5 star fight, so not too bad. The new male tag team match has gone down abysmally, and that's probably going to ruin the drama curve for the show. Okay, so Alexa actually wins her title back from Tamina, which is perfect as Raquel Gonzalez is currently on the sidelines waiting to fight her. So at least that solves one of our problems going into week 7. Incredibly, we also gained another 11,000 fans on Sonya, so I don't know what she's playing at, but keep doing it whatever you're doing. Week 7 has an Extreme Rules match for the women's tag team titles as the opener, and then the women's title as the main event. The 2 mid-card matches are of course the GM interference, and then Finn Balor versus Oney Lorcan for the title. This is a pretty stacked show, so hopefully it gains us a few more fans on Sonya and puts us in a good position going into week 10. It's a great start to the show with a 3.5 star rating for Liv Morgan and Nia Jax versus Garcia and Shotzi. The first midcard match is of course a 2-star rating, but Dana Brooke actually wins, so her morale won't go down too much. So I just accidentally skipped over the Finn versus Oni match, but Oni actually won the title off Finn and it was rated 4 stars. So that's not great for the drama curve, but it will do wonders for our show quality. And then the main event is only a 3.5 star, which really throws the drama curve off, but Alexa retains her title against Raquel Gonzalez. Sonya managed to gain 1,000 fans on us, but we still have a pretty comfortable 21,000 fan lead, so I'm not too worried. But I can't get complacent, we need to keep putting on good shows, otherwise she's definitely going to catch us in week 10. Triple H has just given us a To The Moon power card for Jody Garcia, so that's actually going to help us a lot. Even though she won the fight, Dana Brooke actually took that really badly, so I'm going to go and see what that did to her morale. Before the fight it was actually 100, so it'll be interesting to see how low it's gone. So I've just come in and checked, and Dana's morale's only gone down by 15, so it's really not the end of the world. Going into week 6, Finn and Oni both have pretty low stamina, so I've put them in a call out to try and start their rivalry. Then the opener is a male tag team tables match, with the main event being Alexa versus Raquel for the title again. First midcard match is the mandatory GM interference, and the second one is actually Happy Corbin versus Dexter Lumis in a regular tables match, as I need to save stamina on some of my stars. So let's get into it and see how we do. Unfortunately, the opener is an absolutely terrible 2-star match. I don't know what's going on with this tag team rivalry, but they're putting on awful matches every single week. So maybe next week I'll move their position in the card. The first midcard match has Dana win again, which says a lot about Sammy George's wrestling ability, but it's another 2-star rating, which is not ideal. Okay, I don't know how, but Baron Corbin versus Dexter Lumis has just got a 3.5 star rating. Obviously hindsight is a wonderful thing, but if this was the opener, this show might not have been too bad. But thankfully we smashed it out of the park in the main event as Alexa retains her title again against Raquel Gonzalez, and it's a 4-star rated match. Going into week 9, we've actually managed to gain another 3,000 fans on Sonya, which I don't understand at all, but certainly won't be questioning. For week 9, we've got the women's tag team titles on the line as the opener, and then the men's title on the line in the main event. I actually had a bit of a revelation when thinking about the GM interferences as well in the first midcard match. So when you book a GM interference, it obviously lowers the morale of the person you book it against, but for the person it helps, it actually boosts it. So what I thought is that I could just keep interfering for each of them simultaneously. So one week Dana's morale would get boosted, then the next it would get dropped again. Anyway, the second midcard match is Lumis versus Corbin again, as they put on a pretty good fight last week and they're saving stamina for some of the other stars. So let's advance and hope that we can extend our lead on Sonya. So the opening tag team match gets a lovely 3.5 star rating, and that should initiate Garcia's To The Moon power card as well. That rivalry's level 2, so looking really good going into TLC. Rather amazingly, the first midcard match actually gets a 2.5 star. So it's not a complete throwaway, which is actually quite nice for once. The second midcard match has Lumis and Corbin putting on a pretty good 3-star rated fight. Those two have actually been instrumental in making this entire run work. Then the main event gets a 3.5 star rating as well, with Finn and Lorcan's rivalry growing to level 3. And that show gained us another 9,000 fans on Sonya, so let's use this pay-per-view to really bury her chances of beating us. So unfortunately, Alexander Wolf has actually asked for a $100,000 bonus, and this is kind of ruining my plans for TLC. The tag team rivalry's been putting on some pretty bad matches, so I'm not really that bothered about keeping him, but on the other hand, it's probably going to cost me a fair amount of money to buy some new wrestlers in anyway. But I think for now I'm just going to reject it and see if he stays. And of course he's gone. So that's how the card's looking for the TLC pay-per-view, and of course I'm going to go over to Power Cards and use Fighting Champion. So we've got Finn versus Oni in the main event in an Extreme Rules match for the title, with the opener being a women's tag team tables match for the titles as well. And then we've got the GM interference for Dana this time instead of Sammy, so I'm going to experiment with that. With the second midcard fight being Corbin versus Loomis again in a tables match. And then finally the third midcard fight is Alexa Bliss versus Raquel Gonzalez in a TLC match for the Women's Championship. I've put 3 charity promos in as well to try and gain as many fans as we can, so let's advance into this week and hopefully bury Sonya for good. It's a great start to the show with the women's tag match actually getting a 4.5 star rating. Nia and Liv retain again, but they're actually really low on stamina, so I'm going to have to sign a few more people to help them recover. The GM interference actually got a 3-star rating, so that's not bad at all. Corbin and Loomis once again have a great match, and that's got a 4-star rating and completed the rivalry between them. Incredibly, Alexa versus Raquel actually gets a 5-star rating. I know we've used our power card, but they haven't even got a rivalry going. I didn't realise it was this overpowered. However, Alexa is injured, so we're going to have to try and find a way around that. And the exact same result happens in the main event with another 5-star match, but Finn also gets injured. So what we can take away is that this was an amazing show, but there are a couple of new issues that are going to need sorting out. So that show put us a solid 66,000 fans ahead of Sonya. That's pretty amazing going into the last 5 weeks, so let's not mess it up from here. So week 11 has seen us sign quite a few new faces. We've got Happy Corbin and Robert Roode versus Big E and Dexter Loomis as our new male tag rivalry. Then for the first midcard fight, we've gone ahead and signed Andrea Cannons to feud with Dana Brooke. As you can see on the call out, Tommaso Ciampa has also been signed and Oney Lorcan is being called out. For the second midcard fight, we've got Joaquin Wilde versus Ivar, which is a pretty good matchup from previous experience. Then the main event can only be described as an injury hazard, as we've got Nia Jax and Liv Morgan versus Sammy George and Raquel Gonzalez. That one's for the women's tag teams titles, so let's get into the show and hope that it's alright. It's a good start for the new male tag rivalry as Happy Corbin and Robert Roode pick up the win in a 3-star match. As expected, the first midcard match goes down terribly, but we're just going to have to write these ones off for the last 5 weeks. The second midcard match pulls it back a bit though with a 3-star rating for Wilde and Ivar. Then sadly, in the main event, Nia and Liv retain their titles again, but Liv and Raquel get injured. After week 11, Sonya actually gained a few fans on us, but we're still pretty comfortably ahead, so we just can't let this slip now. Week 12 is looking pretty bad as we've got a lot of superstars injured. But next week we've got Alexa Bliss returning and Finn Balor coming back. So in that show, the male and the female titles will be on the line, so now we've just got to concentrate on getting through this week and not losing too many fans. The second male tag team match actually produces a pretty poor rating this week, so I think I'm going to split them up and use them to save stamina on other stars. The first midcard match was just between 2 jobbers that I threw in for stamina reasons, but it actually gets a 2.5 star rating. The second midcard match, which was the GM interference match, actually gets a 3-star rating. And their rivalry's level 2 now, so that actually could be potentially quite a good fight. And the main event comes in with a 3-star rating as well, as Tommaso Ciampa and Joaquin Wilde win the titles off of Lorcan and Ivar. So after that show, Sonya gained 5,000 fans on us, but she's still 55,000 behind, so hopefully we're all good heading into the last 3 weeks. Week 13, and we've got the male tag team titles on the line in the opener, but I'm a little bit worried that Oney Lorcan is going to get injured. The main event sees Alexa Bliss return from her injury and face Tamina in a tables match for the women's title. I did want to put the male belt on the line, but unfortunately Finn Balor's stamina is still 23. So instead I've just had Kevin Owens call him out and hopefully begin that rivalry again. The first midcard fight is of course the GM interference, and the second midcard fight sees the other male tag team get split up as I fight Robert Roode versus Big E. So let's get into it and hopefully gain some more fans so we can take the pressure off heading into Wrestlemania. So as I feared, Oney Lorcan has got injured, but the match itself was actually pretty good, so the opening to the show is not too bad. The first midcard fight gets another 3-star rating as Sammy George goes over with the help of Shane McMahon. The second midcard match though doesn't go down well at all. Big E and Robert Roode only bring in a 2-star rating, and that's very disappointing. Alexa Bliss comes back from her injury with a bang and retains her title yet again against Tamina in the main event. So that show actually gained us 2,000 fans on Sonya, so I'm pretty optimistic heading into the last 2 weeks. So week 14 sees the eventual return of Finn Balor in the main event, even though he only has 29 stamina. Now I am worried about that, but I also don't want to keep Kevin Owens on the sidelines for so long. So they're having a match for the title as the main event. Then in the opener, I've given Ivar a new partner in Dexter Lumis in hope that this rivalry is still alright, as Oni's going to be out for another 2 weeks, which means he's pretty much written off for WrestleMania. Then of course we have the mandatory GM interference match, and the second mid-card is actually going to be Jody Garcia versus Tamara Tykross. These two actually got a 3-star match last time, so I'm hoping they can do something similar in an Extreme Rules match in the second mid-card slot. So let's advance and hope it all goes well. The opener gets a 3.5-star rating but doesn't start a rivalry, so that's not ideal, but as long as they can put on good matches, it won't be the end of the world. Dana gets her own back on Sammy with a GM interference from Shane, and that's another 3-star rating. The fans must be so confused as what's going on. One week I'm running out to help Dana, the other week I'm running out to help Sammy. It's just an absolute mess. The second mid-card fight only gets a 2-star, and I'm pretty annoyed I've spent $20,000 on an Extreme Rules match now. Obviously I could have put the Dana versus Sammy match there, but at the same time I thought this would at least be a 3-star. Very disappointing, but we'll just move on. So Finn doesn't get injured, which means he will be fighting at WrestleMania, and he retains his title in a 3.5-star fight versus Owens. So we gained another 5,000 fans on Sonya, and we're looking in very good shape heading into WrestleMania. We're about 60,000 fans ahead, so if I mess this up from here, you can all call me the worst GM player ever. So WrestleMania is finally upon us, and this card actually looks stacked. We've got Finn versus Owens in the main event in a Hell in a Cell for the NXT title. Then we've got Alexa versus Tamina in a TLC for the NXT Women's title. And spot the odd one out, in the mid-card we've got our random GM interference match between Sammy George and Dana Brooke. But then we follow it up with the women's tag titles on the line in a TLC match in the second mid-card slot. With the final mid-card slot being for the male tag team titles, and that's an Extreme Rules match. Then of course we've padded it out with 4 charity promos as we want to win by as much as possible. I'm praying I don't mess it up from here, so let's advance and find out if I do. The opening match is actually a little bit disappointing, with Alexa Bliss and Tamina only putting on a 4-star match. Incredibly, it's a 3.5-star rating for Sammy George versus Dana Brooke. So that rivalry is complete, and that's probably the last GM interference I'll ever do. In a huge WrestleMania upset, Garcia and Cannons actually win the titles off of Nia and Liv. That match is only 3-star though, so this has been a pretty awful WrestleMania so far. The third mid-card fight has somewhat pulled it back though, as they get an amazing rating and Ciampa and Wilde retain their titles. The main event had to be a good one, and it's delivered the goods, with Owens going over in a 4.5-star classic against Finn Balor. Is it going to be enough to see us over the line against Sonya though? So Sonya actually gained 50,000 fans on us from that one show alone. So if we didn't have such a ridiculously high lead going into WrestleMania, we would have definitely lost that. Anyway, we come out on top by only 10,000 fans. So in the end, this challenge was much closer than it seemed to be, but overall I wouldn't say that it was the hardest challenge I've ever done. But either way, it was a ton of fun to record, so if you enjoyed this, please do subscribe to the channel for more videos just like it. And for now, that's me done. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.